Josiah Wren is walking, shoulders heavy, backpack resting against his back, focused on a moment he cannot afford to miss. Everything he's worked for, every late night, every sacrifice, comes down to what's waiting just ahead of him. Then he hears it, a thin, broken whimper drifting from the edge of the road. He slows, just for a second. A dog lies there, leg bent the wrong way, body trembling, eyes fixed on him like he's the only person left in the world. People pass without stopping. One glance, then gone. Josiah looks forward again. Freedom is right there, within reach. He looks back. The dog doesn't move. It just watches him, waiting, trusting. And in that quiet, impossible moment, Josiah makes his choice. He drops everything and walks toward the animal, lowering himself into the dirt, choosing compassion over his own future. What he didn't know was that this injured dog wasn't just another stray, and that this single decision was about to rewrite his life in ways he never imagined. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The morning light hadn't yet touched the kitchen window when Josiah pressed another strip of clear tape over the growing crack. The glass had started splitting last week, spreading like a spider web across the pane. He could hear his mother's muffled coughs from her bedroom, the kind that made his stomach twist with worry. Through the damaged window, he watched their neighborhood wake up. Streetlights still glowed against the pre-dawn gray, casting weak circles on cracked sidewalks. Mrs. Peterson next door was already shuffling to her bus stop, medical aid uniform crisp despite the early hour. In the living room, Naomi slept curled on their worn sofa bed, her math textbook still open beside her. Josiah gently moved it to the coffee table, careful not to wake her just yet. She needed every minute of rest she could get. The kitchen told their story in silent details, the stack of unpaid bills tucked carefully in the drawer beneath the microwave, the nearly empty cereal box stretched across 3 more breakfasts, the collection of mismatched mugs from yard sales. Josiah opened the refrigerator slowly, minimizing its rattle. Half a gallon of milk, some eggs, lunch meat that needed to be eaten soon. He did the mental math as he packed Naomi's lunch. His mother's coughing grew louder, followed by the creak of her bedroom door. Althea Wren emerged, already dressed for a day spent mostly in bed, her robe belted tightly around her thin frame. "You're up early," she said, voice rough from coughing. "Just fixing that window," Josiah replied, sliding a glass of water toward her. "How are you feeling?" "I'm fine," she said automatically, but her hand trembled slightly as she reached for the glass. "You don't need to fuss." "It's not fussing if it's necessary," he said, echoing words she'd used countless times when he was younger. The morning unfolded in their usual careful choreography. Josiah cooked eggs while Althea woke Naomi, who stumbled sleepily to the bathroom. Their breakfast conversation was quiet but warm, Naomi chattering about her science project while their mother nodded, trying to hide her exhaustion. Before leaving, Josiah checked the kitchen drawer one more time. The latest overdue notice glared red, but he forced himself to focus on the folded bills in his wallet. Money saved from weeks of repair jobs, tucked away for his certification exam. Just a little more, and he'd have enough. The morning air was crisp as they started their walk to school. 2 blocks down, Mrs. Holloway waved from her porch, holding up a desk lamp with a frayed cord. "Josiah, honey, got a minute?" she called out. Her arthritis-curved fingers clutched the lamp base. "It won't turn on anymore." "We've got time," Josiah said, though they really didn't. He guided Naomi up the worn steps. Mrs. Holloway's living room smelled of coffee and yarn. While Naomi admired the elderly woman's latest crochet project, Josiah examined the lamp's cord. The break was simple, just needed reconnecting and some electrical tape. From his backpack, he pulled out the small repair kit he always carried. "How much do I owe you?" Mrs. Holloway asked when the lamp flickered to life. "No charge," Josiah said, despite knowing every dollar mattered. Some things were worth more than money. They passed Mr. Benton struggling with his laundry cart on the corner. Without being asked, Josiah grabbed one handle while Naomi took the other. Together, they helped the older man navigate the broken sidewalk to his building's entrance. At Naomi's school, Josiah spotted Tommy Jenkins hanging back from his friends, hands in empty pockets during lunch trade time. He knew that look, had worn it himself often enough. "Hey, Tommy," he called, pulling out his packed lunch. "Want to split this? Mom made too much again." The lie came easily, kindness wrapped in dignity. His own school day passed in a blur of classes and quick calculations. During lunch, he worked on Mr. Rodriguez's broken radio in the maintenance room where he helped part-time. The radio's speaker crackled to life just as the bell rang. After school, he biked to Mr. Rodriguez's store to deliver the repaired radio. The cash he earned went straight into his sock, joined by the money he'd been saving. The certification exam fee seemed closer now, almost within reach. The ride home took him past familiar landmarks of struggle. Crown Pawns, neon signs, easy cash advances promising windows, check cashing places with bars on their windows. Each storefront reminded him of what happened when hope ran out and desperation set in. Evening found him at the kitchen table with Althea, the air heavy between them. "Rent's late again," she said finally, eyes fixed on her untouched tea. "I thought maybe this month." She trailed off, and Josiah felt the weight of everything unsaid. He thought of his saved money, of the exam fee, of futures balanced on the edge of present needs. Without a word, he stood and grabbed his bike helmet. "Where are you going?" Althea asked, worry creasing her forehead. "Got one more delivery to make," he said, careful to keep his voice neutral. "Won't be long." The cash in his sock felt heavy as he wheeled his bike onto the front steps. Dusk was settling over their street, painting the houses in shades of gray and shadow. He could see lights coming on in windows, families gathering for dinner, normal lives continuing behind closed doors. Josiah clipped on his helmet and pointed his bike toward the industrial district. The store would close soon, and he couldn't afford to be late. Not tonight. Not with so much depending on him. The sunset had already faded into a gray twilight as Josiah pedaled harder against the drizzle. His jacket wasn't thick enough for the autumn chill, but he couldn't slow down. The repair shop's lights would go dark in 20 minutes, and with them, his chance to collect the payment that could save both the grocery money and his precious exam savings. Industrial Park Road stretched ahead like a river of wet asphalt, street lamps casting lonely pools of light between the warehouses and loading docks. Semi-trucks roared past, throwing spray across his bike wheels. The cold rain had started as a mist, but was steadily becoming more insistent, soaking through his clothes and making his hands slip on the handlebars. He was calculating how to divide the payment, half for food, half for his certification fund, when a sharp cry cut through the rumble of traffic. Josiah's hands tightened on the brakes before his mind fully registered the sound. He tilted his head, listening. There it came again. A whimper that spoke of pain and fear, coming from somewhere near the drainage ditch that ran alongside the road. Josiah squinted through the rain. The shop would close soon. He needed that money. But the cry came once more. Weaker this time. "Just a quick look," he muttered, steering his bike toward the sound. The front tire slipped in the mud as he dismounted. The drainage ditch was deeper than it looked from the road, its sides slick with wet earth. Josiah picked his way down carefully, using roots as handholds. In the growing darkness, he could make out broken branches and scattered debris, signs that something had tumbled down the embankment. Then he saw it, a large brown dog lying on its side in the mud. Its front leg was twisted at a terrible angle, blood matting the fur. The dog's sides heaved with rapid, shallow breaths. When it saw Josiah, it tried to lift its head, but couldn't manage more than a slight movement. "Hey there," Josiah said softly, crouching down. "Easy now. Let me see how bad it is." The dog wore a leather collar that must have cost more than Josiah's entire wardrobe. The metal clasp was snapped clean through, and an electronic tracking tag dangled by a thread, its display cracked and dark. This was somebody's beloved pet, lost and hurt and dying in the rain. Josiah checked his phone. 12 minutes until the repair shop closed. His chest felt tight. If he helped the dog, he'd lose the payment. They needed that money. His mother's medication, Naomi's lunch money, the exam fee he'd worked so hard to save, it all hung in the balance. The dog's eyes met his, deep brown, and filled with a trust that made his throat ache. He thought of Naomi, how she always believed he would do the right thing. He thought of all the times he'd stopped to help others, not because it was easy, but because it was necessary. "Okay," he whispered, more to himself than the dog. "Okay, let's get you some help." He stripped off his hoodie, shivering as the rain hit his t-shirt. The fabric tore easily into strips. He'd meant to replace it soon anyway. With gentle hands, he wrapped the makeshift bandages around the dog's leg, trying to stabilize it without causing more pain. The dog whimpered, but didn't struggle. "I know it hurts," Josiah soothed. "Just hang on." Behind the corner market, 2 blocks away, he found what he needed, an abandoned shopping cart with one wobbly wheel. It wasn't ideal, but it would have to do. Getting the dog into the cart was the hardest part. The animal was heavy, and every movement seemed to cause it pain. Josiah lifted as carefully as he could, whispering reassurance until the dog was settled. He lined the metal basket with what remained of his hoodie, trying to make it more comfortable. The dog's fur was soaked, its trembling constant now. Despite its obvious fear and pain, it watched Josiah with an unwavering gaze. When he began pushing the cart, the dog slowly lowered its head to rest against his arm, as if saying thank you. The nearest emergency vet clinic was 15 blocks away. Josiah's arms burned as he pushed the cart through puddles and across cracked pavement. The wobbly wheel caught on every uneven surface, making the cart jerk and shudder. Each time, the dog would tense, but it never made a sound of complaint. Rain plastered Josiah's t-shirt to his skin. His teeth chattered. Cars passed without slowing, their headlights creating brief moments of harsh illumination. In those flashes, he could see the dog's expensive collar, now mud-stained and useless. Somewhere, someone was probably worried sick about their missing pet. Someone with enough money for tracking tags and fine leather. Someone who might be angry to find their dog in the care of a soaked teenager pushing a stolen shopping cart. But those were thoughts for later. Right now, all that mattered was getting help. The lights of Moreau Emergency Veterinary Clinic finally came into view, its blue and white sign a beacon in the darkness. Josiah's arms trembled with exhaustion as he maneuvered the cart across the parking lot. The dog lifted its head slightly, perhaps sensing they had reached safety. Water streamed from Josiah's hair as he pushed through the glass doors, the cart's wheels squeaking against the clean floor. The waiting room was empty, except for a startled receptionist and a vet tech who looked up from her computer. "Please," Josiah said, his voice rough from the cold. "Please help. I found him on Industrial Park Road. He's really hurt. Please don't turn him away." The fluorescent lights of the clinic lobby felt harsh after the darkness outside. Josiah stood dripping on the white tile floor, water pooling around his sneakers as he clutched a torn piece of his hoodie. The shopping cart left muddy tracks across the clean floor, but no one seemed to care about that now. Dr. Lynette Moreau moved with swift efficiency, her calm presence filling the space as she assessed the situation. She was tall and athletic, with steady hands and kind eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. Two vet techs in blue scrubs rushed forward with a gurney. "Careful with the left front leg," Dr. Moreau directed as they transferred the dog. "Possible compound fracture. Let's get him to imaging right away." She glanced at Josiah. "You found him in a drainage ditch?" "Yes, ma'am." Josiah's teeth had finally stopped chattering, but his clothes clung to him uncomfortably. "About 40 minutes ago on Industrial Park Road. He must have fallen down the embankment." The dog's eyes were half closed with pain, but its tail thumped weakly against the gurney when Josiah spoke. Dr. Moreau noticed this and made a note on her clipboard. "The collar tag is damaged. Were you able to read any information?" Josiah shook his head. "Just part of some fancy crest and 2 letters. V and A. The electronic part isn't working at all. We'll need to run a microchip scan, Doctor," Moreau told one of the techs. She turned back to Josiah. "This dog needs immediate surgery. The leg injury is severe, and I'm concerned about internal bleeding. We can't wait to locate an owner." The receptionist, a middle-aged woman with reading glasses hanging from a chain, cleared her throat. "Doctor, we need authorization for emergency treatment. And the initial deposit—" Josiah's heart sank, but he stepped forward before she could finish. His hands shook slightly as he pulled out the wadded bills from his pocket. Money that represented so many different hopes and needs. Rent help, grocery money, the precious exam savings he'd been gathering dollar by dollar. "How much do you need?" His voice came out steady, even though his stomach was in knots. The receptionist named a figure that made him flinch. It would take almost everything he had. He glanced at the dog on the gurney, remembering its cry of pain in the darkness, the trust in its eyes when he'd found it. With cold fingers, he counted out the bills and placed them on the counter. Dr. Moreau had been watching this exchange. Something in her expression shifted as she saw his hands trembling, not from cold now, but from the weight of the decision. She stepped closer to the desk. "Janet, let's apply the Good Samaritan discount," she said quietly. "And we can waive the emergency hour surcharge." The receptionist nodded and recalculated, pushing back several bills. It still left Josiah with barely enough for bus fare, but the relief of the reduced amount made his eyes sting. "Thank you," he whispered. "We need to move him to surgery now," one of the techs called out. They began wheeling the gurney toward the swinging doors that led to the treatment area. But as they started to move, something remarkable happened. The dog, which had been barely conscious, suddenly lifted its head. With obvious effort, it stretched out its uninjured paw and placed it over Josiah's wrist, where it rested on the gurney's edge. The grip was gentle but insistent, holding him there. The staff paused, exchanging surprised looks. "Doctor?" Moreau's eyebrows rose as she observed this unexpected connection. The dog's eyes, though clouded with pain, remained fixed on Josiah's face, unwilling to let him go. "It's okay," Josiah said softly, leaning closer. "You're safe now. These people will help you get better." His free hand gently stroked the dog's wet fur. "I promise." Only then did the paw relax its hold, allowing them to wheel the gurney away. Just before the doors swung shut, Dr. Moreau glanced back at Josiah. "I've never seen a rescued animal show that kind of immediate trust. You must have a way with them." Josiah managed a tired smile. "I just did what needed doing. That's all." The lobby felt emptier after they left. The receptionist handed him a clipboard with forms to fill out, explaining the process for trying to locate the owner. Josiah's wet clothes had begun to dry stiffly as he wrote down everything he could remember about where he'd found the dog. His handwriting looked shaky. Exhaustion was starting to catch up with him. When he finished the paperwork, He checked his pocket. One wrinkled dollar remained, not enough for both bus fare and a phone call. Through the lobby windows, he could see the rain was falling harder now. The walk home would take over an hour in this weather. "Do you need to call someone?" the receptionist offered, her voice gentler now. "You can use our phone." Josiah shook his head. "Thank you, but I'll manage." He didn't want to worry his mother by calling this late, and he knew they couldn't afford to come get him anyway. Better to just start walking and figure out how to explain everything when he got home. He zipped up his thin jacket, bracing himself for the cold rain waiting outside. The torn hoodie sleeve was still clutched in his hand, a reminder of the choice he'd made and couldn't take back. As he pushed open the clinic door, the midnight air hit him like a wall of ice. The street stretched dark and empty before him, but somewhere behind those surgical doors, a dog was fighting for life because he'd stopped to help. The walk home seemed endless. By the time Josiah turned onto his street, his clothes were soaked through again, and his muscles ached from shivering. The porch light cast a weak yellow glow across their weathered front steps. Through the kitchen window, he could see his mother's silhouette at the table. His hand trembled slightly as he turned his key in the lock. The door creaked, that same familiar sound he'd been meaning to fix, and he stepped into the warmth of their small house. The kitchen light spilled into the cramped living room where Naomi lay curled on the fold-out sofa, her breathing too quick to be truly asleep. Althea sat perfectly still at the kitchen table, surrounded by stacks of papers, unpaid bills, past-due notices, and payment schedules all spread out like a map of their troubles. Her fingers traced the edge of an envelope marked "Final Notice" in bold red letters. When she looked up at Josiah, the shadows under her eyes seemed deeper than usual. "You're soaked through," she said softly, pushing back her chair. "Where's your hoodie?" Josiah's throat felt tight. He moved into the kitchen light, water dripping from his clothes onto the linoleum floor. "Mama, I need to tell you something." Her hands went still on the table. "Did something happen with the delivery?" "I never made it there." The words came out heavy with exhaustion. "I found an injured dog on Industrial Road. It was hurt real bad, bleeding, couldn't walk. I had to help it. Had to help." Althea's voice trailed off as understanding dawned in her eyes. "Josiah, please tell me you didn't spend the money on a stray dog." "It wasn't a stray. It had this fancy collar, but it was broken. I took it to Dr. Moreau's emergency clinic." He swallowed hard. They needed payment to start treatment. The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the silence that followed. On the sofa bed, Naomi had given up pretending to sleep and sat up, hugging her knees to her chest as she watched them. "How much?" Althea's voice was barely a whisper. "Almost all of it. Dr. Moreau gave us a discount, but—" Josiah's shoulders sagged. "I'm sorry, Mama. I know we needed that money. I know the rent's late, and your medicine." "Sorry?" Althea stood up so quickly her chair scraped against the floor. "Josiah, we are 3 weeks behind on rent. The power company left another notice. I had to cut my pills in half to make them last." Her voice cracked. "And you spent our emergency money on somebody else's dog?" "I couldn't leave it there to die." Josiah's eyes burned with tears he refused to let fall. It was looking right at me, trust in its eyes, like it knew I'd help. "Trust doesn't pay bills." Althea's hand slammed down on the stack of papers, making Naomi jump. "Trust doesn't keep a roof over our heads or food in the refrigerator. We are this close to losing everything. And you—" She pressed her fingers to her temples, trying to steady her breathing. "The delivery money. Tell me you at least got that." Josiah shook his head. "The store was closed by the time I got the dog to the clinic. I missed the whole thing." Althea sank back into her chair, the anger draining from her face, leaving only fear behind. Her hands trembled as she gathered the scattered bills into a pile. "What are we going to do now?" From the living room, Naomi's small voice cut through the tension. "Will the dog be okay?" Josiah looked at his sister's worried face, remembering how the dog had gripped his wrist before surgery. "I hope so, Naomi. The doctors are doing everything they can." The house settled into a heavy silence. Outside, a car passed slowly, its headlights sweeping across their walls. Althea began sorting the bills again, her movements mechanical, as if keeping them organized could somehow make the numbers smaller. "Get out of those wet clothes before you catch cold," she finally said, not looking up. "There's some leftover soup if you're hungry." "I'm not hungry." Josiah stood there a moment longer, wanting to say more, to explain how it had felt impossible to walk away from an animal in pain. But he knew no explanation could make their situation better right now. He had just changed into dry clothes when the first rumble of engines broke the pre-dawn quiet. More engines joined in, a deep mechanical chorus that seemed to fill their narrow street. Josiah rushed to his window and froze at the sight below. 15 black SUVs, their polished surfaces gleaming even in the dim street lights, rolled to a stop in front of the Wren house. They moved with military precision, forming a line that stretched the length of the block. Porch lights began flicking on up and down the street. Neighbors emerged onto their stoops or peered through curtains. Mrs. Holloway across the street clutched her robe closed at her throat. Mr. Benton stood in his doorway, coffee mug forgotten in his hand. "Josiah." Althea's voice shook as she appeared in his doorway. "What's happening?" Before he could answer, car doors began opening. Men and women in expensive tailored coats stepped out into the pre-dawn chill. They moved with the practiced efficiency of people used to handling important matters. One of them approached the Wren's front door. His knock was firm, but respectful. "Are you expecting someone?" Althea whispered, her face pale with fear. "No, ma'am." Josiah moved past her toward the stairs, his heart pounding. Through the window, he could see more figures emerging from the vehicles. One of them stood out, an older man with silver hair and an air of quiet authority. He waited on the sidewalk, watching the house with an expression Josiah couldn't quite read. The knock came again. Josiah opened the door to find a woman in a charcoal gray coat, holding a tablet. "We're looking for Josiah Wren," she said, her tone professional but kind. "That's me." The silver-haired man stepped forward then, and something in his bearing made everyone else step back slightly. His eyes were red-rimmed, as if he hadn't slept, but they were sharp with emotion as he looked at Josiah. "I'm Ephraim Vale," he said, his deep voice carrying clearly in the morning stillness. "My family owes your son more than thanks." Morning light crept over the weathered houses, casting long shadows across unmowed lawns and cracked sidewalks. The line of black SUVs gleamed like obsidian against the modest surroundings, drawing every eye on the block. Children pressed their faces to bedroom windows, while adults gathered in small clusters, whispering behind their hands. Ephraim Vale's shoes, Italian leather that probably cost more than a month's rent, made hollow sounds on the worn wooden steps of the Wren's porch. His presence seemed to fill more space than his physical frame, though he carried himself with careful restraint. Behind him, his staff maintained a precise formation, their tailored coats and alert postures marking them as professionals accustomed to managing delicate situations. From one of the vehicles came a soft whine. Argent, still bandaged but alert, watched through the tinted window with unusual intensity. The dog's eyes never left Josiah. "Your actions last night meant more than you could have known," Ephraim said, his voice carrying the weight of sleepless hours and profound relief. "Argent was my Catherine's constant companion for years. Yesterday afternoon, we held a private memorial service, the first anniversary of her passing. During the confusion of guests leaving, somehow Argent's leash was mishandled." He paused, mastering emotion. "We've had search teams out all night. Althea stood in the doorway, one hand gripping the frame as if to steady herself. Her threadbare robe couldn't hide how thin worry had made her. Naomi peeked around her mother's hip, taking in everything with wide eyes but staying carefully quiet. The learned behavior of a child who understood when adults were navigating difficult moments. "I didn't know," Josiah said softly. "I just saw he was hurt and scared." "Which makes your choice even more remarkable." Ephraim's gaze swept over the house's exterior. The peeling paint, the patched window, the missing shutter. His expression revealed nothing, but his eyes noted every detail. "You had no idea who Argent belonged to, no guarantee of any reward. Yet you spent your own money and risked missing work to help him." A sleek woman in her early 30s stepped onto the porch then, Sabine Vale, though she didn't introduce herself. Her tailored pants suit and perfect posture created a stark contrast to the setting. She watched Josiah with barely concealed skepticism, as if trying to solve a puzzle. Ephraim reached into his coat and withdrew an envelope. "I'd like to offer you proper compensation for—" "Please, sir." Josiah's voice was quiet but firm. "I appreciate it, but I can't take money for doing what anyone should have done." A murmur ran through the watching staff. Sabine's eyebrows rose slightly, but it was Ephraim's reaction that mattered. Something in his face softened, as if Josiah's refusal had confirmed something important. "Anyone should have done it," Ephraim repeated thoughtfully. "But they didn't. You did." He returned the envelope to his pocket. "Perhaps we could discuss a different arrangement. I'd like you to visit the estate once Argent has recovered fully. He's formed an unusual attachment to you, which is remarkable given his training. And I think you and I should have a longer conversation about your future." "My future?" Josiah glanced back at his mother, whose worried expression had shifted to cautious wonder. "Yes. And of course, we'll handle the veterinary expenses." Ephraim's tone made it clear this wasn't up for debate. "Dr. Moreau called to inform us of your payment. That will be refunded immediately." The morning air filled with possibility. Neighbors who had been watching from a distance began to drift closer, sensing that something unprecedented was happening. Mrs. Holloway clasped her hands together as if in prayer. Mr. Benton gave Josiah a proud nod. "That's very generous," Althea managed, her voice stronger now. "Josiah has always had a good heart." "So I see." Ephraim smiled slightly. "It's rare to find genuine character, especially in someone so young. Sometimes the right person simply needs the right opportunity." In the SUV, Argent pressed his nose against the window, leaving a foggy mark. The dog's unwavering focus on Josiah seemed to carry meaning beyond simple gratitude. Sabine stepped closer to her father, her voice pitched low but clear. "Dad, remember what we discussed about being careful with—" "I remember," Ephraim said quietly. To Josiah, he added, "My office will be in touch this week to arrange details. For now, get some rest. You've earned it." The staff began returning to their vehicles with practiced efficiency. Ephraim descended the steps with the same measured grace he'd shown climbing them. But before he turned away, he looked back at the small family in their doorway, at Josiah's straight shoulders, Althea's protective stance, Naomi's hopeful face. Morning light caught the silver in his hair as he nodded once, a gesture that felt like both acknowledgement and promise. Then he was walking away, his daughter at his side, while Argent's eyes remained fixed on Josiah through the window. The black sedan that pulled up to the Wren house that afternoon seemed almost modest compared to the morning's convoy, but it still drew curious glances from the neighbors. Josiah, wearing his cleanest jeans and a carefully ironed button-down shirt, tried not to fidget as the driver opened the door for him. The ride passed in a blur of changing landscapes, from familiar corner stores and tired buildings to gradually widening streets lined with manicured trees. When they finally turned through massive iron gates, Josiah's breath caught. The Vale estate spread before him like something from a different universe. Gravel crunched under the car's tires as they followed a curved drive past perfectly trimmed hedges and stone fountains that sparkled in the afternoon light. The main house rose like a mountain of pale stone and gleaming windows, its size making Josiah feel suddenly very small. Marlon Vick, the estate's groundskeeper, was adjusting sprinklers near a flower bed when they arrived. He straightened up, weathered hands covered in soil, and gave Josiah a quiet nod. Josiah noticed the man's broken rake handle before he noticed the elaborate topiary behind him. "That's a clean break," Josiah said, pointing to the rake. "If you have wood glue and some twine for pressure, I could show you how to fix it." Marlon's eyebrows rose slightly, and something in his expression softened. "Most folks don't even see the tools, just what they do to make things pretty." Inside, a housekeeper led Josiah through halls lined with oil portraits and antique furniture that probably cost more than his entire neighborhood. His footsteps echoed on marble floors, but beneath the grandeur, he sensed an emptiness. Too many quiet rooms, too few signs of daily life. The wealth felt like a shell around something broken. They found Ephraim in a sun-filled room where Argent was resting on a plush bed near floor-to-ceiling windows. The moment Josiah appeared in the doorway, the dog's head lifted. Despite his bandaged leg, Argent struggled to his feet and limped straight to Josiah, ignoring the handler's gentle attempts to keep him still. "Careful now," Josiah said softly, kneeling to meet the dog at eye level. "You need to heal first." Argent leaned heavily against Josiah's legs, tail wagging slowly, and refused to move away. Ephraim watched this reunion with visible emotion, his usual reserve cracking slightly. "He's refused to settle properly since returning home," Ephraim said. "This is the most relaxed I've seen him." Teresa Bell, the estate's cook, arrived with tea service on a silver tray. She smiled warmly when Josiah thanked her by name, and her eyes crinkled with approval when he helped her move a heavy teapot. They settled into leather chairs while Argent stayed pressed against Josiah's feet. Sabine arrived shortly after, taking a seat where she could observe everything carefully. Her polished appearance and sharp gaze made Josiah think of a lawyer preparing to cross-examine a witness. "Tell me about your studies," Ephraim said, stirring his tea. "Your principal mentioned you excel in technical subjects." "I do okay," Josiah said modestly. "Mostly, I like fixing things. Started with my mom's old radio when I was 12, then neighbors began asking for help with electronics. It's not fancy work, but it helps with bills." "And this certification exam you're saving for?" "Industrial electronics and basic systems repair. It's the first step toward an apprenticeship program." Josiah straightened slightly. "The pass rate isn't great, but I've been studying whenever I can." Sabine set her cup down with a quiet clink. "That's an ambitious goal for someone your age." "Maybe," Josiah agreed, "but my family needs stability more than I need sleep." The simple honesty of that statement hung in the air. Ephraim's expression shifted subtly, while Sabine's skepticism wavered for just a moment. As afternoon light slanted through the windows, Josiah found himself sharing more, helping elderly neighbors with small repairs, teaching Naomi math using broken circuit boards, dreaming about maybe opening a repair shop someday that could train other kids from the neighborhood. He never complained about hardship, never hinted at wanting handouts. When Ephraim asked about community needs, Josiah spoke plainly about practical things: after-school programs, job training, reliable transportation. Before he left, Ephraim made an unusual request. "Come back for dinner tomorrow. Bring one of your repaired devices. I'd like to see your work firsthand." The same car delivered Josiah home as sunset painted the sky in shades of gold. He found his mother and sister waiting anxiously at the kitchen table. With steady hands, he placed an envelope from Ephraim before them. "The clinic refund," he explained, "and some extra for groceries this week." Naomi peeked inside and gasped. Althea pressed her hand to her mouth. "Mr. Vale said it's not charity," Josiah added quickly. "He called it correcting an imbalance. And he wants me back for dinner tomorrow." Through their worn curtains, the last sunlight caught the edges of the envelope. A small thing that somehow felt like the first page of a new chapter. Morning sunlight streamed through the patched kitchen window of the Wren house, catching dust motes that danced in the air. For the first time in months, the atmosphere felt lighter, as if someone had lifted a heavy blanket off their shoulders. Althea stood at the counter, carefully slicing fresh bread. Real bakery bread, still warm and fragrant. Her hands trembled slightly, but her smile was genuine as she packed lunches for both her children. In the small living room, Naomi hummed while buttoning her school uniform, her favorite hair ribbons finally washed and pressed. Josiah sat at the kitchen table, examining an old circuit board he'd restored months ago. He'd saved it from a discarded computer, carefully cleaning each connection and replacing damaged components. Now it worked perfectly. A small triumph of patience and skill. He wrapped it carefully in a clean cloth, tucking it into his backpack for tonight's dinner at the Vale estate. "You're sure about this?" Althea asked, handing him his lunch. Her voice carried equal measures of hope and worry. "Yes, Mom," Josiah replied. "Mr. Vale just wants to see some of my work." Outside, the neighborhood buzzed with speculation about yesterday's convoy. As Josiah and Naomi walked to school, they passed neighbors who tried to catch his eye, or called out friendly greetings. Mrs. Holloway waved from her porch, proudly showing off her working lamp to another resident. Mr. Benton gave him a thumbs up from the laundromat window. Josiah kept his head down, uncomfortable with the attention. He'd never wanted to be noticed. Being noticed usually meant trouble in their part of town. But now, people looked at him differently, as if his simple act of kindness had somehow changed everything. At Jefferson High School, the whispers followed him through the halls. Someone had posted a shaky phone video of the SUVs, and local social media was ablaze with theories about why Ephraim Vale had visited their neighborhood. During third period, the office secretary delivered a note. Mrs. Helena Shore, the guidance counselor, wanted to see him immediately. Josiah found her reorganizing his thin file folder when he entered her office. "Josiah, please sit down," she said warmly, warmer than she'd ever been during his previous 3 years at Jefferson. "I've been reviewing your academic record. Your aptitude for technical subjects is remarkable." He shifted in the hard plastic chair. Last semester, he'd tried to meet with her about technical school programs, but she'd been too busy. "And now I hear you've caught Mr. Vale's attention?" Her smile widened. "That could open some wonderful doors. Have you considered applying to engineering programs?" "I'm focusing on the certification exam first," Josiah said quietly. "It's what I can afford." "Oh, but with the right recommendations." She pulled out college brochures she'd never shown him before. "We should discuss your options." Later that evening, the Vale estate felt different in twilight. Warm lights glowed behind tall windows, and Argent greeted him at the door with an enthusiastic tail wag, mobility already improving. In a wood-paneled study, Ephraim cleared space on an antique desk while Teresa served a light dinner. Josiah carefully unwrapped his circuit board, explaining how he'd diagnosed the problems and sourced replacement parts from other discarded electronics. "Where did you learn this?" Ephraim asked, examining the precise soldering work. "Library books, mostly," Josiah replied. "YouTube tutorials when I can use the school computers, and a lot of trial and error with things people throw away." Sabine, who'd been listening from a leather armchair, leaned forward. "You taught yourself all this?" Josiah nodded. "Breaking something that's already broken isn't scary. It's how you learn what works." Ephraim set the circuit board down carefully. The exam fee. Consider it handled. But tell me something else. If you could fix anything in your neighborhood, what would you repair first? Josiah thought carefully, aware of both Vale's watching him. He could have asked for anything personal. A car, a new house, a full scholarship. Instead, he spoke about what he saw every day. We need safe places for kids after school, he began. Too many parents work late shifts, so younger siblings wait in convenience stores or on street corners. If we had a supervised space with tools and computers, kids could learn useful skills instead of getting into trouble. He described how many neighbors had valuable trade skills, but no way to teach them. How single mothers missed job opportunities because unreliable buses meant choosing between morning shifts and getting their children to school. How vacant buildings could become workshops or training centers if someone invested in the community instead of just extracting rent. Every block has people who know how to build, fix, or create things, Josiah explained. But we lack tools, space, and time. People shouldn't have to leave home before dawn just to find decent work. Sabine had stopped taking notes, her earlier skepticism softening as she listened. Ephraim's expression grew thoughtful, his fingers steepled under his chin. When the clock struck 9, Ephraim walked Josiah to the door himself. Argent followed, pressing against Josiah's leg one last time. "Come back tomorrow," Ephraim said, his voice carrying new purpose. "I want you in a meeting most men twice your age aren't invited to." Josiah stood in front of the gleaming Vale Enterprises building, tugging at the collar of his cleanest white shirt. The fabric felt stiff and inadequate compared to the sleek suits streaming through the revolving doors. His worn backpack, containing only a notebook and 2 sharpened pencils, felt like a child's school bag among the leather briefcases and designer laptop bags. The security guard checked his name against a list, and a young assistant escorted him to the 30th floor. Polished marble floors reflected his nervous face as they walked past glass-walled offices and modern art installations that probably cost more than his family's yearly rent. The boardroom doors opened to reveal a long mahogany table surrounded by leather chairs. Men and women in expensive suits chatted quietly, their watches and jewelry catching the light from floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Josiah felt every scuff on his second-hand dress shoes. Ephraim Vale stood from his chair at the head of the table. "Ah, Josiah, please, join us." He gestured to an empty seat near him, drawing curious glances from the executives. Sabine sat across the table, her expression neutral but watchful. A man in an impeccably tailored gray suit approached with a practiced smile. "Dorian Quill, Chief Operations Officer," he said, extending his hand. His grip was firm, but somehow empty, like a handshake practiced in front of mirrors. "What a pleasure to meet our young friend who's caused such a stir." Josiah sat quietly as the meeting began. PowerPoint slides filled with charts and buzzwords flashed across a screen. Executives took turns presenting strategies for community engagement and urban renewal initiatives. They spoke about leveraging social impact and optimizing outreach metrics. "Our priority," Dorian said smoothly, "is maximizing visibility while minimizing operational complexity in underserved communities." He clicked to a slide showing smiling children receiving backpacks. "Photo opportunities like these demonstrate our commitment to corporate responsibility." Ephraim's voice cut through the rehearsed presentation. "Josiah, you live in one of these communities. What are your thoughts on our approach?" The room went silent. Josiah felt every eye turned to him. His heart hammered, but he remembered his mother's daily struggles, Naomi's careful counting of breakfast cereal, and all the talented neighbors who just needed a real chance. "Sir," he began, his voice quiet but steady, "people in my neighborhood don't need more pictures. They need reliable buses that run early enough for morning shifts. They need somewhere safe for their kids to go after school that doesn't cost money they don't have. They need tools and training for actual jobs. He took a deep breath, aware of Dorian's tightening smile. Teens like me, we're not looking for handouts or photo ops. We want to learn real skills, but everything useful costs money or requires transportation we can't afford. People treat us like we're either future criminals or charity cases. What we really need are places where we're treated like future electricians, mechanics, programmers, future adults who could help build something lasting in our own community. The silence deepened. Dorian cleared his throat, ready to redirect, but Ephraim leaned forward. Continue, please. What specific resources would make the most difference? For the next 15 minutes, Josiah outlined practical needs, supervised workshop spaces with basic tools and computers, evening classes taught by local tradespeople, reliable childcare so single parents could attend training, small business mentoring, and transportation assistance for job interviews and early shifts. The talent is already there, Josiah explained. People know how to fix cars, repair electronics, style hair, build furniture. But they lack space, equipment, and time. They need bridge support until their skills can support them. Ephraim's eyes were bright with interest. Several executives were taking genuine notes now, but Dorian's smile had become a mask, his pen tapping steadily against his leather portfolio. Josiah had unknowingly exposed the hollow center of Dorian's carefully crafted community engagement strategy. After the meeting, Ephraim asked Josiah to stay. What would you say to helping us design a youth innovation and trades center? A pilot program in your neighborhood? Real resources, real training, real opportunities? You mean actually build something like what I described? Better. You'd help shape it from the ground up. Your practical knowledge, combined with our resources. Ephraim spread his hands. Think about it. Talk it over with your mother. In her office down the hall, Sabine was already pulling up public records on her computer, searching through the Wren family history. Something about this situation felt too perfect, too miraculous. Her father, usually so guarded since her mother's death, was opening up to a stranger. She needed to be certain. The city bus ride home felt dreamlike to Josiah. The same tired streets looked different now, full of possibility. He imagined vacant buildings transformed into workshops, empty lots becoming training spaces, neighbors teaching their skills to the next generation. In their small kitchen that night, Althea hugged him tight, her eyes bright with tears. Maybe, she whispered against his hair, just maybe, God really did send that dog to you for a reason. The morning sun cast long shadows across the cracked sidewalk outside Reverend Odessa Pike's church as neighbors gathered, their whispers mixing with the rustling of paper programs being passed around. News vans lined the street, their satellite dishes reaching toward the sky like metal flowers. The old brick building, weathered but dignified, had never seen such attention. Reverend Odessa stood near the steps, her silver hair gleaming as she greeted each arrival with the same warm smile she'd offered during years of quiet service. The church pantry behind her, usually a humble operation of dented cans and day-old bread, now hummed with new energy as volunteers sorted through boxes of fresh donations. Josiah hung back, uncomfortable in the pressed shirt Ephraim's office had sent over. Naomi clutched his hand, her eyes wide at the cameras. Althea stood straighter than she had in months. The weight of constant worry temporarily lifted from her shoulders. "Look at all these people," Naomi whispered, pointing at the growing crowd. "Is it really because of you and the dog?" Before Josiah could answer, a video began playing on a portable screen set up near the podium. There he was, captured by someone's phone camera, standing awkwardly on his own porch, while Ephraim Vale expressed genuine gratitude. The footage had gone viral overnight, the contrast of gleaming black SUVs against peeling paint, a powerful businessman thanking a teenager who'd spent his last dollars saving a beloved pet. Comments and shares had poured in. Finally, some good news. This is what character looks like. Help this kid help others. The story struck a chord that reached beyond their forgotten neighborhood. Ephraim stepped to the microphone, his presence commanding but somehow warmer than in board meetings. What began with one young man's compassion has revealed something larger, he said. Not just kindness toward an animal, but the kind of character our communities need to thrive. He outlined the pilot program, a youth innovation and trade center that would occupy the abandoned warehouse 2 blocks over. And to ensure this initiative truly serves local needs, Ephraim continued, I'm pleased to name Josiah Wren as our youth advisory partner. Applause rippled through the crowd. Mrs. Shore, Josiah's guidance counselor, beamed from her seat, a folder of scholarship applications clutched to her chest. Just yesterday, she'd called him to her office, suddenly discovering his exceptional potential, after years of barely noticing him. Near the back, Mr. Harrison, their landlord, nodded along. All traces of his recent eviction threats vanished. That morning, he'd personally fixed their leaking faucet and mentioned flexible payment arrangements, the same problems he'd ignored for months. Althea dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Just that week, she'd seen a specialist about her chronic condition, the appointment arranged through Ephraim's private office. The doctor had developed a new treatment plan, one that might actually let her work again. God works in mysterious ways, she'd said on the ride home. Reverend Odessa stepped forward to announce the surge in pantry donations. Viewers across the country want to support the community that raised such a thoughtful young man, she explained. Her eyes met Josiah's with knowing warmth. Just yesterday, he'd used some of Ephraim's first support payment to replace the pantry's dying freezer, the same one that had struggled to preserve donations for years. Sabine Vale watched this gesture from the church steps, her usual skepticism softening. She'd expected the teenager to splurge on himself, but instead, his first thought had been helping others. It matched everything in the background checks she'd quietly run, showing years of small kindnesses, fixing neighbors' appliances for free, sharing lunches, walking younger kids past dangerous corners. As Ephraim continued outlining future plans, Josiah felt hope expanding in his chest like a balloon, beautiful but almost frightening in its size. He imagined Naomi growing up with stable housing, no more midnight moves or cut-off notices. He pictured himself learning advanced electronics, maybe even teaching others someday. The future seemed to crack open, spilling light into corners that had been dark for so long. Local teens gathered around a display showing preliminary designs for the center. Where the warehouse now stood empty, there would be workshop spaces, computer labs, and classrooms. The same kids who usually hung around street corners with nowhere to go were pointing excitedly at potential programs: automotive repair, coding classes, carpentry basics. See? Naomi tugged at Josiah's sleeve. You fixed more than just a dog. The crowd's enthusiasm swelled as Ephraim described summer youth employment programs and adult education opportunities. Someone started a chant of, "Thank you, Josiah," making him blush and duck his head. His mother squeezed his shoulder, pride radiating from her tired face. At the edge of the church lot, partially hidden by a news van, Dorian Quill stood with his phone pressed to his ear. His polished smile had vanished, replaced by tight determination, as he spoke in low tones. Yes, I need you to pull everything on the Wren family. School records, medical history, court documents, everything. No, this can't wait. I want it all by morning. Josiah woke to the sound of muffled sobs coming from the living room. Sunlight barely filtered through the thin curtains, but already something felt wrong. He found Naomi curled up on the couch, clutching a borrowed tablet from her friend, tears streaming down her face. "They're saying awful things about you," she hiccuped, turning the screen toward him. Comments flooded social media. Scammer family. Probably hurt the dog themselves, taking advantage of a grieving man. Before Josiah could process this, Althea's sharp intake of breath drew him to the kitchen. On their small TV, a local news station played grainy cell phone footage on repeat. The timestamp showed the night of Argent's rescue, but something was wrong. The clip showed Josiah near the dog before the injury, the sequence edited to suggest he had orchestrated the whole thing. Sources question the authenticity of the feel-good story that captured hearts, the reporter announced. Was this a calculated attempt to exploit philanthropist Ephraim Vale's grief over his late wife? Althea's hands trembled as she muted the volume. Where did they even get this? "You were at work that evening." "It's not real," Josiah said, his voice hollow. "Someone cut different videos together." But his protest sounded weak against the tide of accusations flooding every screen. His phone buzzed with a message from Sabine Vale. "My father's advisors are concerned about optics. We need to pause public involvement until this is resolved." The formal tone felt like ice water down his back. Just yesterday, she had started to believe in him. At school, whispers followed him through the hallways. Students who had congratulated him the day before now turned away. Mrs. Shore, the guidance counselor, canceled their scholarship meeting with a vague email about pending review of circumstances. During lunch, Josiah overheard two teachers. "Always seemed too good to be true. These families, they see money and—" He couldn't finish his sandwich. After school, the final blow waited on their front door. A formal notice citing lease violations. Mr. Harrison, emboldened by their sudden vulnerability, listed infractions he had ignored for years: unauthorized repairs, noise complaints, late payments. The message was clear. Now that they were in the spotlight, he wanted them gone. "We should never have let ourselves hope," Althea whispered, crumpling the notice in her fist. She sank into a kitchen chair, the weight of public scrutiny crushing her shoulders. "They're digging up everything. My old medical bills, that misunderstanding with the insurance company." Her voice broke. "Making us sound like criminals." Josiah's phone kept buzzing. Missed calls from Ephraim, messages from the project team, reporters requesting comments. Each notification felt like an accusation. The youth center sponsors had already frozen funding, citing community concerns. Naomi tried to delete cruel comments as they appeared, but they multiplied too quickly. "Why are they being so mean?" she asked. "You only helped Argent. You made things better." But had he? Looking around their small house, now under threat, Josiah wondered if kindness was a luxury they couldn't afford. Every good thing he'd tried to build was being twisted into something ugly. He deleted his social media accounts, stopped answering calls, and told his mother he wouldn't visit the Vale estate anymore. The thought of seeing Argent, whose rescue had started all this, filled him with a strange new pain. His simple act of compassion had been transformed into something calculated and dirty. "Maybe if I just disappear for a while," he suggested, watching his mother try to hide fresh bills under old ones. "Let it all blow over." "The truth will come out," Althea said, but her voice lacked conviction. They both knew truth moved slower than rumors. That evening, needing escape from the suffocating atmosphere at home, Josiah found himself on the church steps. The same steps where yesterday's celebration had felt like a turning point. Now they were just cold concrete. Reverend Odessa emerged from the church, her steady presence unchanged by the chaos. She sat beside him without speaking, letting the evening settle around them. "They're making me doubt myself," Josiah finally admitted. "Making me wonder if I should have just kept walking that night." "The world is quick to celebrate kindness," Reverend Odessa said, her voice gentle but firm, "and sometimes even quicker to suspect it. But truth doesn't stop being truth just because lies get louder first." Josiah stared at his hands, the same hands that had bandaged Argent, fixed neighbors' appliances, carried groceries for elderly residents. Yesterday, they had seemed capable of building a future. Now, they felt empty. The church bells chimed the hour, their familiar sound a reminder that some things remained constant even when everything else shifted. But for Josiah, sitting in the growing darkness, even that comfort felt far away. The streetlights cast long shadows through the kitchen window as Josiah returned home. His mother sat hunched over a scatter of papers at the table, quickly wiping her eyes when she heard the door. Naomi pretended to read on the couch, but her worried glances between them revealed she noticed everything. "I thought I could protect you both from knowing how bad things were," Althea said softly, her fingers trembling as she sorted through overdue notices. "But now everyone can see our struggles online, twisted into something ugly." Josiah pulled out a chair, the wood scraping against linoleum. "Mom, whatever it is, we'll figure it out. 3 weeks ago." She stopped, swallowing hard. "3 weeks ago, I almost sold your certification study materials, the ones you saved so hard for." Her voice cracked. "My prescription had doubled, and I couldn't." She pressed her hands flat against the table, steadying herself. "I stood in the used bookstore for 20 minutes before I couldn't do it. Couldn't take away your one chance." The confession hung heavy in the kitchen's fluorescent light. Josiah reached across the table, covering his mother's hand with his own. "It's okay, Mom." "But it's not okay." Althea's whisper was fierce. "Now they're digging up that predatory loan from when you were sick as a baby. The one with the impossible interest that I couldn't pay. They're posting it everywhere like proof we're criminals." She pulled out her phone, showing him comment threads dissecting their financial history. "Making it sound like we planned this whole thing with the dog to get money from Mr. Vale." Josiah watched Naomi pretend harder to read, her small shoulders tense. Every cruel comment, every suspicious news clip, every sideways glance from former supporters, it all landed on his family like stones. "The paperwork follows you forever," Althea continued, sorting through the pile. "Every mistake, every desperate choice, every time you couldn't pay, it's all there waiting to be used against you. And now Mr. Harrison's looking for any excuse." She didn't need to finish. The eviction threat loomed over them, making the walls feel closer, less secure. "I'll withdraw from everything," Josiah said quietly. "Tell Mr. Vale I can't be involved anymore. Maybe if I step back, they'll leave us alone." Across town in Ephraim's study, a similar conversation grew heated. Dorian Quill stood with perfect posture, his argument polished as his shoes. "The optics require distance, Mr. Vale." "Until we can verify—" "Verify what?" Ephraim interrupted, pacing near the window. "That a teenager spent his last dollar saving my dog? That he's been helping his neighbors for years without recognition? What exactly needs verification?" Sabine sat perched on the leather sofa, caught between loyalty and doubt. "Father, we have to consider the company's reputation. If there's any chance—" "Any chance of what? That kindness might actually be real?" Ephraim's voice carried years of boardroom authority. "When did we become so afraid of genuine goodness that we mistake it for manipulation?" Meanwhile, in the quiet of her clinic office, Dr. Lynette Moreau frowned at her computer screen. The surveillance footage from the night Josiah brought in Argent showed clear timestamps. She compared them to the viral video claiming to show Josiah with the dog earlier. Something didn't add up. Back in the Wren house, Naomi finally abandoned her pretense of reading. She slipped into Josiah's room and carefully placed his certification study materials on his pillow. The books and notes he'd accumulated through months of extra jobs and careful saving. When Josiah found her there, she looked up with fierce determination. "The dog chose you," she said simply. "Argent knew who you were, even if other people forgot." Her unwavering faith made his throat tight. Once, he'd believed good choices led to good outcomes. Now, he wasn't sure he trusted his own judgment anymore. The books on his pillow felt like artifacts from a different life, one where hope didn't come with thorns. He was about to respond when his phone buzzed. An emergency alert lit up the screen. Breaking. Fire and electrical failure reported at Vale Foundation Temporary Housing Complex. Multiple families affected. The timestamp showed 11:47 p.m. Josiah stared at the alert, his heart pounding as he realized people might be in danger at this very moment. People already struggling, already vulnerable, just like his own family. Without pausing to consider consequences, Josiah grabbed his worn denim jacket and rushed out into the night. The cold air bit at his face as he pedaled hard toward the Vale Foundation's temporary housing complex. He knew too well how fear could spread through buildings where people already lived on the edge of security. Street lamps blurred past as his mind raced. These weren't just residents to him. They were families like his own, where every disruption could spiral into crisis. The acrid smell of smoke reached him before he saw the building. A converted 3-story structure that housed 15 families, transitioning from homelessness. Red and blue emergency lights painted the scene in harsh colors. Fire trucks were already present, but chaos ruled the parking lot. Children wrapped in blankets huddled close to parents. Elderly residents sat on concrete curbs, some still in nightclothes. The actual fire appeared contained, but dark smoke lingered like a warning. Josiah dropped his bike and plunged into action. He spotted a group of teenagers standing uncertain near the fence and called out, "Hey, we need water and blankets. Who's with me?" Their hesitation vanished with his clear direction, and suddenly they had purpose. "The drinking fountain in the lobby still works," one boy offered. "Perfect. Grab any cups or bottles you can find." Josiah turned to 2 girls. "Can you check which families have kids under 5? They'll need extra blankets." As the teens dispersed, Josiah heard labored breathing from the stairwell. An elderly man, Mr. Washington, gripped the railing with white knuckles, trying to navigate smoke-clouded steps. "Sir, let me help you." Josiah tucked himself under Mr. Washington's arm, supporting his weight. "Nice and slow. We've got this." "My heart pills," the man wheezed. "Left them." "We'll get them once you're safe," Josiah promised, guiding him carefully down. Vale Foundation staff huddled near official vehicles, speaking in urgent whispers about liability and press statements. Dorian Quill's voice cut through the noise. "We need these people relocated before media arrives. The optics." "Maria's inhaler!" A woman's cry interrupted his planning. "It's still in our bathroom." Before anyone could stop her, she moved toward the building. Josiah caught her arm. "Which apartment?" "2C, under the sink," she said, tears streaming. "She can't breathe without it." Josiah nodded to a firefighter who cleared him to enter, since the flames were contained. He took the stairs 2 at a time, holding his sleeve over his nose. The second-floor hallway was hazy but navigable. In 2C, he dropped to his knees and reached under the scorched vanity. His fingers found the inhaler case. As he emerged from the building, Sabine Vale stood near the command center, tablet in hand, preparing official statements. But her eyes followed Josiah as he delivered the inhaler, then immediately moved to help others. No cameras captured his actions. No one praised his choices. He simply served, even though many of these same residents had seen his face in negative news coverage hours earlier. Between tasks, Josiah's repair instincts drew him to the electrical panel. Something felt wrong. The burn pattern suggested old issues, not sudden failure. He noticed melted wire coating, corroded connections, and signs of amateur patches, problems that had clearly existed before tonight. The breakers were jury-rigged, he muttered, examining closer. Multiple times. A maintenance worker hovering nearby shifted uncomfortably. We reported it twice last month. Josiah's stomach tightened. If safety concerns had been flagged and ignored, this wasn't just an accident. He heard Sabine's sharp intake of breath behind him. She'd followed his investigation and reached the same conclusion. Their eyes met. For the first time, he saw her certainty crack. The polished skepticism that had regarded him as a potential threat softened into something like understanding. In this moment of crisis, with no cameras rolling and no rewards promised, Josiah was exactly who he'd been the night he found Argent. Someone who simply helped because it was right. The panel needs complete replacement, Josiah said quietly. And there are probably similar issues in other buildings. Sabine nodded slowly, her clipboard lowering. I see it now, she said, though she seemed to mean more than just the electrical problems. A commotion near the site office drew their attention. Paramedics were clearing the last hallway, declaring the building secure for investigation. Through the office window, Josiah spotted Dorian Quill's distinctive silhouette. The executive moved with unusual urgency, pulling a file box from a cabinet and checking over his shoulder as he headed for the door. The maintenance logs, Josiah realized. Documentation of every repair request, every inspection, every decision that led to tonight's failure would be in those files. Josiah stepped into the site office doorway, his heart pounding. The fluorescent lights flickered, casting unsteady shadows across Dorian's startled face. The executive clutched a metal file box against his expensive suit, now wrinkled from the night's chaos. Mr. Quill, Josiah said quietly, not moving from the exit. Those look important. Dorian's polished smile appeared, though strain showed at its edges. Just securing sensitive documents. Standard protocol during any incident. At 4 a.m? Without logging removal? Sabine's voice cut through the smoky air as she appeared behind Josiah, her eyes fixed on the box. Let me see those files. Ms. Vale, with all respect, these contain confidential. Now, Dorian. The authority in her tone left no room for debate. Reluctantly, Dorian placed the box on a nearby desk. Sabine began pulling out folders, her manicured fingers moving with practiced efficiency. Maintenance requests, inspection reports, and work orders spread across the surface. Many bore Dorian's signature, authorizing bare minimum repairs or deferring them entirely. 3 separate electricians flagged critical panel issues, Sabine read aloud, her voice tightening. All marked postponed for budget review under your authority. Josiah watched understanding dawn in her eyes. The same man who had pushed to distance the foundation from him had also cut corners that put families at risk. The realization seemed to physically pain her. We had to balance priorities, Dorian said smoothly. Capital improvements require careful— Dr. Moreau is here, a staff member interrupted from the doorway. She's asking for Mr. Vale urgently. Lynette Moreau strode in, her veterinary clinic coat exchanged for casual clothes, but her professional intensity unchanged. She carried a thick manila envelope and wore the expression of someone done with silence. I've been trying to reach you for hours, she said, addressing the room, but looking at Sabine. There's something you need to see. She spread contents across a clear section of desk, time-stamped intake forms, payment records, and most damning, crystal-clear security camera stills showing Josiah arriving at the clinic with an already injured Argent in the shopping cart. The dog's wound occurred hours before Josiah found him. Dr. Moreau stated firmly. "The injury pattern and blood coagulation prove it. I have 3 staff witnesses who can verify his arrival time and condition." More photos emerged: Josiah's torn hoodie, makeshift bandages, his rain-soaked clothes, the exact cash he'd handed over. The truth, preserved in clinical detail. Heavy footsteps announced Ephraim's arrival. He took in the scene, the scattered maintenance files, the clinic evidence, his daughter's rigid posture, and Dorian's carefully blank face. "Someone better explain," Ephraim said quietly, "why I'm looking at proof of negligence in our housing units and a deliberate smear campaign against a teenager who saved my dog." Dorian straightened his tie. "Sir, everything I did was to protect the Foundation's interests. When the maintenance issues came to light, we needed to control the narrative. The boy's story provided convenient—" "Convenient?" Sabine's laugh held no humor. "You buried safety warnings that could have prevented this fire, then tried to destroy someone's reputation to cover your mistakes." Josiah stood silent, soot streaking his clothes and exhaustion pulling at his shoulders. He'd expected dramatic confrontation, shouting, maybe even threats. Instead, shame filled the room like the lingering smoke. Shame at how easily truth could be buried, at how quickly suspicion had overcome faith in goodness. "I'm sorry, Josiah." Sabine's words came soft but clear. "I let doubt poison something pure. I forgot what real integrity looks like." Ephraim's expression held more pain than anger as he looked at Dorian. "We built this foundation to lift people up, not exploit their vulnerability. How did we fall so far from that?" Outside, the sky began to lighten. First responders packed equipment while displaced residents huddled in blankets, waiting to learn what would happen next. Through the office window, Josiah spotted news vans pulling into the parking lot, reporters emerging with cameras and microphones. Dr. Moreau gathered her evidence carefully. "The truth doesn't need manipulation to stand," she said. "It just needs people brave enough to speak it." Sabine touched her father's arm. "The press will want statements about the fire." "Yes," Ephraim agreed heavily, "and about everything else, too." Josiah straightened his shoulders, feeling the weight of another public moment approaching. But this time would be different. This time, truth stood with him, solid as sunrise breaking over the horizon. Dawn painted the sky in hesitant strokes of pink and gold, as residents from the damaged building huddled together under scratchy emergency blankets. News vans lined the blocked-off street, their satellite dishes reaching toward the brightening sky like metal sunflowers. Camera crews jostled behind hastily erected barricades, microphones extended like accusing fingers. Ephraim Vale stood at the edge of the property, his usual commanding presence softened by the weight of revelation. His jacket was creased, his tie loosened, small signs of a long night's toll. He turned to Josiah, who looked equally worn, but somehow stronger in the morning light. "They're waiting," Ephraim said quietly. "What do you want me to say? After everything Dorian did, everything we let happen, you've earned the right to decide how this story ends." Josiah looked past the cameras to where Mrs. Patterson, an elderly resident, clutched her medication bag with trembling hands. Near her, the Martinez family tried to comfort their crying toddler. A teenager about Naomi's age sat on a curb, still wearing pajamas, looking lost. "Sir," Josiah said, his voice steady despite his exhaustion, "I don't want this to be about revenge." Sabine, standing nearby with Dr. Moreau's evidence folder, blinked in surprise. "These families need real help right now," Josiah continued. "They need beds tonight, medicine tomorrow, and honest repairs next week. Making this all about destroying Mr. Quill won't fix their homes or make anyone's life better." He gestured toward the damaged building. "Tell the whole truth. About Argent, about the smear campaign, about the maintenance problems. But then talk about what comes next. Real investment. Not quick fixes or photo opportunities, but actual long-term commitment that treats people with dignity. After what they did to your reputation, Sabine started. That's exactly why, Josiah interrupted gently. When you're treated like you don't matter, the last thing you need is more anger. You need someone to finally see you're worth investing in. Ephraim studied the young man before him, seeing again why Argent had trusted him instantly that rainy night. You continue to teach me, Mr. Wren. He squared his shoulders and walked toward the press barrier. Cameras clicked rapidly. Reporters called out questions. Josiah stood slightly behind him, straight-backed, but humble. Good morning, Ephraim began, his voice carrying across the parking lot. I owe you several truths today. He spoke clearly about Argent's rescue, revealing the surveillance footage that proved Josiah's innocence. He detailed the maintenance negligence, accepting ultimate responsibility as Foundation head, even as he announced Dorian's immediate dismissal. Each word seemed to lift shadow from Josiah's shoulders. But dwelling on our failures helps no one, Ephraim continued. These families deserve better than becoming footnotes in a scandal. Starting today, we're providing immediate temporary housing in quality hotels. Within 1 week, we'll begin complete renovation of this property with triple-checked safety protocols. He paused, then smiled slightly. And Mr. Wren's proposed Youth Innovation and Trades Center? It launches immediately, with full funding and community oversight. Because this young man reminded us that true philanthropy isn't about appearing generous. It's about recognizing dignity and investing in potential. The crowd's mood shifted like weather changing. Residents straightened, hope replacing resignation in their faces. Reporters' questions turned from accusatory to curious about implementation details. Sabine stepped forward to outline specific relief measures, her professional polish now warmed by genuine commitment. Dr. Moreau watched from the sidelines, nodding in quiet satisfaction as her evidence helped restore justice. The teenager who had once emptied his pockets to save a wounded dog now stood tall as plans unfolded to lift his entire community. When the formal statements ended, Ephraim turned away from the cameras. In the relative privacy of their small group, he faced Josiah with naked emotion in his eyes. You know, he said softly, you saved much more than my dog that night. He placed a hand on Josiah's shoulder. You brought my conscience back. Josiah ducked his head, still uncomfortable with praise. Behind them, social workers began coordinating hotel placements, while Foundation staff distributed food and clothing vouchers. The sun climbed higher, burning away the last traces of smoke and shadow. A new day had dawned, built not on vengeance, but on the simple power of truth, aligned with compassion. Mrs. Patterson shuffled over to squeeze Josiah's hand. You're a good boy, she whispered, just like my Harold was. Coming from her, it felt better than any news headline or official vindication. Sabine organized transport for the displaced families, her phone pressed to her ear as she arranged details. But her eyes kept returning to Josiah with a mix of admiration and lingering regret for having doubted him. The morning's first relief supplies arrived. Blankets, toiletries, fresh coffee and paper cups. Small comforts, but they represented something larger. Proof that help was real this time, not just promised. Josiah accepted a cup of coffee, letting its warmth seep into his tired hands as he watched hope slowly replace fear in his neighbors' faces. 3 months after the dawn revelation at the damaged housing complex, Magnolia Street hummed with anticipation. Fresh paint gleamed on the restored brick walls of what had once been an abandoned tool warehouse. Crisp autumn banners fluttered in the morning breeze announcing, "Welcome to Argent House Innovation and Trades Center." The transformation hadn't happened overnight. In the days following the public reckoning, emergency housing arrangements had given displaced families safe shelter in local hotels. Construction crews had worked through summer heat to gut and restore the old warehouse, their progress watched daily by curious neighbors. Legal teams had crafted documents ensuring the Wren family couldn't be pushed from their home by predatory tactics. Most importantly, Ephraim had followed through on every promise, funding Josiah's certification exam, securing comprehensive medical treatment for Althea, and establishing permanent support systems for the community. Now, on opening day, the center stood as testament to what happens when kindness meets opportunity. Inside, the repair lab sparkled with new tools and workbenches. The computer room housed rows of monitors where teens could learn coding and digital skills. A well-stocked pantry promised regular meals for hungry students, while the family support office offered everything from job placement to child care assistance. In a special wing named Grace and Argent Memorial Clinic, Dr. Moreau had set up a small veterinary assistance program. A portrait of Ephraim's late wife Grace, holding Argent as a puppy, hung beside the entrance, her gentle smile seeming to approve of how her legacy had grown. Josiah moved through the morning crowds with quiet confidence, his new certification badge catching the light. As youth program coordinator, a part-time position that worked around his continued education, he greeted each nervous teen with the same patient attention he'd once given a wounded dog on a rainy night. "The soldering station is over here," he explained to a group of boys eyeing the repair lab. "Next week, we start basic electronics troubleshooting." Near the reading nook, 10-year-old Naomi sat importantly at her small desk, checking names off a sign-in sheet with careful penmanship. "Welcome to Argent House," she chirped to each visitor, her pride evident in every movement. Althea watched from the front row of seats, her face fuller and more relaxed than it had been in years. Regular medical care had brought color back to her cheeks, and the constant fear of losing everything had finally lifted from her shoulders. Beside her, Reverend Odessa dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, overcome by seeing hope take such concrete form in her neighborhood. "Look how far we've come," the Reverend whispered, squeezing Althea's hand. Dr. Moreau stood nearby, discussing clinic protocols with her new part-time assistant. She'd insisted on being involved, saying any place born from an act of animal rescue should continue that mission. Sabine, elegant as always but warmer now, moved between groups answering questions about programs and scheduling. Ephraim observed it all from a quiet corner, his eyes following Josiah with paternal pride. The boy who had once emptied his pockets for a stranger's dog now moved with the natural authority of someone who knew his worth. Not with arrogance, but with the steady confidence of character proven under pressure. Mrs. Patterson from the housing complex tottered in on her walker, beaming at the medical resource desk where her prescription assistance paperwork was being processed. The Martinez family's toddler played in the children's corner while his mother attended a job skills workshop. Every corner buzzed with activity, proof that transformation wasn't just about buildings. It was about believing people deserved better chances. "I never thought I'd see this place looking so alive," Mr. Benton commented, remembering the graffiti-covered warehouse that had stood empty for decades. "Used to warn kids to stay away from here. Now we invite them in," Josiah replied, adjusting a display of student repair projects. Throughout the morning, more neighbors arrived, some hesitant, some eager, all welcome. They found not charity, but opportunity. Not handouts, but tools for building better futures. The center hummed with possibility, each room evidence that kindness could become foundation rather than just fleeting relief. As afternoon shadows lengthened toward closing time, a small commotion at the entrance caught Josiah's attention. A young boy, maybe 12, stood uncertainly in the doorway. His arms cradled a bundle made from what looked like an old bath towel. From the bundle came a weak whimper. The boy's eyes were wide with worry as he shifted from foot to foot. I found him behind the grocery store," he stammered. "His legs hurt bad. I didn't know where else to go." Carefully, he pulled back the towel to reveal a small, trembling puppy with a badly scraped paw. The sight sparked an immediate memory in Josiah. Another rainy night, another wounded creature, another choice between walking away and stopping to help. Josiah knelt down to the boy's eye level, his smile gentle and understanding. "You did the right thing," he said softly. "Let's take care of him." I hope you enjoyed that story. Please like the video and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have hand-picked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.